Today we are learning basketball with Tony East. You can find him on Twitter at Tony R. East. He covers the Indiana Pacers, the Indiana Fever, pretty much all the pro basketball going on in Indiana up at a whole bunch of outlets. The Next Hoops, Forbes Sports, WTHR.com. He's the host of Locked On Pacers. And I can't wait to just dive in to all things Indiana today. But first, how are you doing today, Tony?
Doing great, and I got to give you credit. I forget when I originally learned your name was Ryan, and I figured out that your Beyond the Arc handle was based on your initials. One of the best Twitter handles there is. I don't think people give you enough credit.
Hey, man. I'm glad you brought that up because it's really my own fault because I came in with the handle first, so no one has any idea what my name is. They just see Beyond the RK. And they're like, oh, well, what the heck does that mean? I got people telling me it's like related to like a wrestling move, like RKO or something like that. Like, I have no idea what they're talking about. But, now that I got the initials out there with the full name, now it makes sense. So I appreciate the shout, inspired, the low post and all the fun basketball handles that you see flying around. And, on kind of your background and where you're from, you went to Indiana University. We had Indiana's own Sasha Stefanovic on the podcast not too long ago. So shout out Sasha. And what was it like? I just kind of it sounds like you've been in Indiana basketball your whole life. So what's it like? Just coming up in that and your background into doing what you're doing today, covering Indiana basketball.
Yeah, I grew up here mostly. I was in Illinois for a little bit before moving here as a kid, but yeah, it's just like different, I know the Pacers use the "We Grow Basketball Here" slogan about the state, and it truly is just different, right? Like, I'm not saying it's the best high school talent anywhere or anything like that, but it has several of the top 10 biggest high school arenas are here, and people love IU, people love Purdue, people love Notre Dame. Butler is like in their tinier conference. People love Butler, their historic arena. Like, just what people love here, right? It's an event, it's a sport, it's a social thing. Like, the Colts and Peyton Manning being really good when I was growing up kind of shifted things a little bit, making it more of a football state now. But it's just different here, right? And it's always been my favorite sport anyway. But that made it really just connect for me that everybody loves it here, and it's certainly like a purist thing. Like, Tyrese Haliburton just went to a sectionals game, right? Like, for high school a couple days ago. It's just how it is. So it's just really cool. It makes it all connected at like all these levels, and pretty much every team in the pros, men's and women's, you can find some connection to the state or some team here because of that.
Yeah, and obviously, there's basketball all over the world, but like there's just something about Indiana basketball. Like, obviously the Hoosiers, that whole the movie, the theme, Pacers even rocking jerseys inspired by that at different points. Like, it just means a little more in Indiana, and it's just cool to see that sport culture where you see soccer internationally, you see football like all around the country. Just it's like live and die your culture, your city. But for Indiana, it really is a lot of basketball for hoop heads, and that's the number one. So is that part's cool to see. And in terms of covering the team, I was wondering if you could share any tidbits on your process from the media side. Breaking down the game, whether it's coming up with stories, asking questions, what goes into that process to make sure you're asking something interesting, while keeping it short and sweet.
Yeah, this year it's been a little different for me because I haven't been doing game coverage as much in writing, which I really like. I want to get back to that. So this year I try to think of trends or a player who's playing really well or poorly recently and try to own in on that, especially after a game where they play particularly well. Like, this is great timing for this recording because Haliburton's been exceptional since All-Star, right? Like, one of the best players in the league. He's having his best offensive 4 games maybe of the season. So it's like, okay, why? Rick Carlisle, what did you see that they just played the Raptors in a really ugly basketball game, right? 37 turnovers, a bunch of fouls. But Haliburton was awesome, right? He really stood out in that kind of setting. Like, how did he do that? Why do you think he was able to rise above the style of this game and play like that? Tyrese, you just had the All-Star break. It's your first time off in forever. How much has that helped you? What are you doing differently now? I like that kind of stuff. But I think a little bit like you, I'm very numbers pilled, right? I majored in math in school. And so that helps me work backwards of like, oh, here's a trend I want to ask about this, or oh, here's a number I think is interesting. let me watch for that and then ask about that. And I think that makes it easier to get to where I want to do too. So I think it's important, and I think this gets lost a lot in the way the current NBA is, to like, please ask about games. If anyone's listening to this and has tips, like, even if I'm not necessarily writing about something after a game, I want to ask about the stretch that was the worst or the best, or a player that did something stand outish, to like learn about the why, and like, can this happen again? Is this predictive? Whatever. But also like that stat-based approach, I think, really helps me, because you have a reason for asking why you're asking. You can get to the bottom of something. So that's kind of where I take it from a lot of the time. But you just got to keep up with the trends and keep up with who these people are and how they get to the place they are. And you can tell when something's different about them, right? Like, oh, look, Tyrese Haliburton's skipping today. He wasn't skipping in recent games, or, something like that. It's just a lot of observation, a lot of number stuff. And, you're around the Magic all the time. Like, you can just tell when stuff is different. It leads to the best questions and interactions.
Absolutely. And, before we dive into the Pacers, I would love to hear your thoughts a little bit on the Fever and, what everyone has dubbed the Caitlin Clark effect. Getting to, see Caitlin Clark in person, cover her games, just, the energy around those games, even compared to the NBA games where they're, sharing the same arena, and, the energy just follows Caitlin everywhere. I mean, everyone knows how big of an impact she's made. Just to drop a few numbers on that kind of Caitlin Clark effect that everyone has, really rallied around, is obviously she broke Pistol Pete's Division I scoring record in college. She sets record ratings every step of the way, with the first final matchup with Angel Reese with 10 million viewers. And then she breaks her own record with the rematch against Reese with 12 million viewers the next year, 14 million viewers in the Final Four against UConn, and up to 18 million viewers for the national championship against South Carolina, which she ended up losing. But that was the first women's title game to outdraw the men's title, just to put it in perspective how big she was in college. She sets all these attendance records. And then with the Fever, it was estimated that she added a $72 million, or sorry, let me rephrase. The Fever had the highest year-over-year growth from 23 to 24, with a $72 million social media value in 2024. And then the WNBA's revenue, it was estimated that she was responsible for 25% of the entire league's revenue via Ryan Brewer, who also determined the economic impact on the city of Indianapolis was $36.5 million, just from this incredible player, just polarizing talent and drawing in eyeballs from every direction, where you got your family that have never watched a basketball game in their life start talking to you about it. So what's it like covering this phenom?
Yeah, I don't have a ton. Like, my friends are sports fans, but not really basketball fans, which is fine. I like it that way. But they don't. For background, they don't text me about ever, hey, can you get me Pacers tickets? Never has happened. The second Caitlin declared, I got 3 that day. I was like, man, this is something. And I've covered the Fever since the Wobble, right? So the standout thing to me is, like, 2 years ago, they had Leah Boston as their superstar rookie. Like, went to South Carolina, it's just a crazy popular program, unanimous rookie of the year. She was amazing, and like, there was more buzz. They were better that year, but 2,000 to 3,000 fans, and typical-ish what I'd seen before, a little bit more interest, I guess. And then they draft Caitlin, and it's like, what? What is happening? They sold out every game, more than the Pacers, more fans than the Pacers in attendance. We used to sit, our media seats were on the court. You covered Magic games. The Magic media is on the floor. That's how it was for us for Fever. But for Pacers, we were up, in the club level. They moved us up for Fever because people wanted to sit down there to watch the team play. Like, that's good. That's really good that they have that level of popularity. And she goes everywhere with that. A preseason game in Dallas, people are swarming them at the airport. They're moving, like, teams are moving out of their arenas in cities to get more people to watch. It is remarkable. And I really wondered how it would last, because they started terrible. They were 1-8 to start the year. And I don't know if when did the Spurs come to Orlando for the first time during Wemby's rookie year? So at Indy, it was like their 7th or 8th game. So the Wemby hype was still crazy high. And then he kind of had a lull in the middle of the season before he took off again. So I wondered, like, okay, is this Caitlin stuff? They're not playing well. Is it going to like lull? And then she'll play better and it'll surge back up. It never, ever, ever, even a tiny bit dipped. Like it was just a constant crescendo. And then they got better too. So it was like meaningful games. They were winning. Like it was just crazy to see. I mean, a couple years ago when the Fever were 5-31, Gainbridge Fieldhouse was undergoing renovations in the summer. So they played in a different arena, like 15 minutes outside the city, and it's where IUPUI, a college, plays. And there were, I'm not kidding, there were like less than 1,000 people at these games. Like it was, like a family event for people, and like you could get a ticket and a hat and a hot dog for like $14 or something. I was like,
man.
A Pacers game, the hot dog alone's like that much, So to see it go from that to this so fast, where like they're probably going to be one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league this year, is just crazy. And it's so fun. Like they deserve it because they play a fun style too. Obviously they deserve it because she's really popular because she's good, but it's just awesome. It is really cool.
Yeah, it's just insane to see. I remember getting, like, even my girlfriend more interested in the matchup, in the rivalry as it's budding in college basketball. And she's not she's not a basketball person at all, but like she was into it. She was, here for the budding rivalry, and that's just, to me, where it all kind of started. That back and forth, and to obviously that rivalry has kind of continued to grow ever since. But that just insane to see her impact on the league, on the sport, and just the entire city. She's a one of a kind player, a phenom, and also I would add that it was one of those like perfect timing moments where the league is also ascending, and then a star just appears at the right time as the league popularity was already slowly growing and growing, and then boom, just one of the best timing moments that you could ask for, that just elevates the entire sport on the whole level and really just lets people appreciate basketball for what it is. So had to shout out Caitlin Clark and everything she's doing before we dive into the Pacers. And on the Pacers, obviously you caught Haliburton in the game last night against the Raptors, where Haliburton goes for 33 points, 11 assists to only 1 turnover, 5 stocks, 7 of 9 from 3, 12 of 15 field goal. Becomes the 3rd player in NBA history to record 30 points, 10 assists, 5 threes, while shooting 80% from the field, with Stephon Marbury and Mark Price. Shout out to Starbury real quick as well. But he's really having an underrated season. I almost have too many stats I want to get to, but like he's 2nd in assist to turnover ratio in the whole league, behind Chris Paul with 5 and 5.3. He's 6th in offensive EPM, tied with Donovan Mitchell, 98th percentile in the whole league, and then 93rd percentile just in overall EPM as a player as well. I mean, his super efficient. But before I just list off a million stats, what do you think the difference is? I believe Caitlin Cooper had mentioned that. The one and only,
undisputed.
She is the model. We're just trying to do it like she does. She shared a couple things that like one fun fact. He's cut off more flare screens than entire teams this year, which is super interesting, but also shared that he might have been dealing with a little bit of an injury to start the year. And I don't think people have realized just how great he's really been, even since not just the All-Star break, like you had mentioned, where he's dropping 26 points, 12 assists, 5 threes, shooting it lights out, but really since the new year, where he's just turned his whole season around, it feels like, and he's just been one of the best offensive creators in the entire league so far, where he's putting up 20 points, a 9 assist to 2 turnover ratio on 66% true shooting since the new year, and that stats via Abdi of The Athletic. So what have you seen from Haliburton that has really shifted, and is it as simply as finally getting healthy?
Maybe it's that. Maybe it's something else. What I wrote about and that he talked about that was really interesting. So the poor Charlotte Hornets have been their bugaboo. I can't believe I even have to say that about the Pacers, but they have like a losing record against the Hornets these last couple of years. They lost the Hornets in early December. Definitely their low point of the season, right? They were trying to win that game and absolutely could not do it. And since then, December 13th was their first game after they had the NBA Cup break. He has been great since then. 19.1 points, 9 assists, 1.6 turnovers on 50, 42, 87 splits since then. That's like 2.5 months of really good play. The scoring is down from like his full season numbers the last 2 years, but they have Pascal Siakam now. He doesn't have to do that as much, right? But I only mentioned the scoring being down a little bit to say that's basically his numbers from the last 2 years when he was an All-Star both of those years, an All-NBA last year, obviously a little inflated from his absurd start. Like, he's been really good for a long time now, right? Like over a half of a full real NBA season. So the reason the perception of his season is so bad is deserved. His start stunk. He was bad. And like he would tell you that. And we were asking him, why? Are you hurt? He'd say, no. Have you figured out why you're playing bad? He'd say, no. Like, he'd say, everybody has the answers but me. And like, he deserved to have to take those lumps and answer those questions because it was rough, right? He was like under 30% from three for long stretches. And the passing numbers were good at times, but not there at times. Like, he had 11 total assists their first 3 games. He had a poor stretch in like mid-November too, and they were getting smoked by like Toronto and Brooklyn. You know, it was a really weird start, and he deserved that criticism. He had to take that. But once he got like that Charlotte game woke up the whole team. The record since then is one of like the 5 or 6 best in the league, and he has been sensational since then. And his offensive impact numbers that you cited earlier, like, they're so important to the team because he has the ball all the time, which he should. He's an efficient self-creator. He sets up everybody else. You know, he's got his wiggle back right now. And so all of a sudden when whatever happened, if he got healthy from 4 days off because of the NBA Cup, if he found joy in basketball again, if something awoke inside him because they lost the Hornets and literally could not take a lead in the fourth quarter of that close game against a banged up, crappy Hornets team, like they're definitely their low point of the year. Whatever happened was sensational because now he looks awesome again, right? He's definitely been in an all-star level since then. It was too late for him to actually be an all-star this year. I don't really think he was close, quite frankly, but yeah, he's been awesome since. And it's such a push and pull for him internally, I think, where he knows he's an awesome passer. You cited the assist to turnover ratio. He would call himself pass first, and he should. However, he's also probably the best self-creator on the Pacers. And he's a very efficient finisher on plays that he creates for himself. So it's this battle of like wanting to get his teammates involved and running the offense and keeping a tempo and making the system go. And also being like, hey, sometimes I just gotta like go to cup or like take a step back three or take a heat check, you know. And I totally understand that being challenging. I think Giannis has even had to fight through that. Giannis calls himself pass first, and so it's just kind of how it's probably going to be for him forever, a little bit to an extent, because his passing makes him so brilliant. But when he gets that balance down, when Pascal's playing great, when their defense as a team and his as an individual has been a little better, this is his best defensive season by far in the pros. It all has kind of ascended into him being back into a top 25, 20 player. Of late, he's been even higher than that. So that, among many things, has turned around their season. And it's hard to really say exactly what it was, if it was an injury, if it was just overdoing it. You know, he played World Cup, then a conference final season, then Olympics, you know, rehabbing in between. Whatever the reason was that made him not himself, who knows? But once he got back to finding himself, finding his joy in the game again, he's looked awesome for the better part of 2.5 months. And hey, look, Pacers are pretty good when he plays like that.
Who would have thought? We just needed a normal Haliburton to get back in the realm of what he's been. And even like when he was first traded there, I thought of him as like a plus defender, a connector, like a guy that could just make good reads and hit the open three. But he has just blossomed into quite literally. There's stretches where I think he's the best combination of passing and shooting in the entire league. Like it's really hard to find guys like that. And I can understand the challenges in being relied on as an offensive scoring engine for the entire team, where you have to trust his decision making almost every play down.
Yes.
And now thankfully you have Siakam to kind of be another outlet there, where both of them are super efficient across the board now, where take some of Haliburton's scoring rates. I won't list off all the numbers, but he's basically at 1.1 or 1.2 points per possession as a scorer in pick and rolls, spot ups, handoffs, and off screens, all of which rate 84th percentile or better. And when you include passes, those numbers basically go up, especially in pick and roll. He's at 1.2 point per possession on 900 pick and rolls, which is in the
Jeez.
also in the 94th percentile,
That
which
volume
is
is just insane too.
wild, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a reliable decision maker there, and the Pacers are feeling it finally. We were mentioning before the pod, they're on a 24-10 record, up to the 4 seed. Looks like they have pretty much secured that playoff spot. They don't really have to worry about a play in, most likely because of how well they're playing as of late. On the whole season, they're 13th in point differential, 9th in offense, 15th in defense, 6th in pace, 5th in assists to turnover. And part of that is from their shooting efficiency and their turnover percentage on both sides of the floor. And, it just feels like everyone knows you got to be ready to play with pace against Pacers. Like they are looking to push up the pace, push the ball up the floor to the outlet. And that was kind of my next question is it feels like the outlet passing is almost contagious. Do you think that's something that Carlisle has instilled? Do you think that's something that feels like you're playing with Haliburton, who's always looking up? So you end up with Thomas Bryant looking up with the outlet pass every once in a while. So like what is going on up there with the style of play?
Yeah, huge play. Like last night, they played Toronto. Right before halftime, Toronto misses a shot. Siakam grabs rebound on the rim, turns, flings it 80 feet. Ben Shepherd gets a layup at the buzzer, right? Like, it's everybody. It is really a team thing. Like, it's made possible by Tyrese Haliburton, obviously. But, even last year, the thing that always stood out to me when the Pacers felt like they're playing their best or, like, really encapsulating their style the best is the ball would go out of bounds for whatever reason, during a run of play, a turnover, bounces out the rim, whatever. And it was always Buddy Hield that made me notice it, but like would sprint to go get it. Like they're trying to get in transition when the ball's just like dead, And so that is just like a contagious style of we want to run, get it up the floor. Rick Carlisle has mentioned multiple times, I'm actually working on a story on this. They want to lead the league in passes, right? Like that's part of it too, is get off the ball, move the ball. You can say they've said whatever reason for that they want. Like a couple guys give slightly different answers on why that's important, but when I was playing basketball, which was not close to an NBA level, obviously, our coach always tried to instill in us via drills or talking that, like, the ball moves faster than anyone can run, right? Like, if you pass, you are creating space using the ball because a defender has to cover that ground. And so they love to move it. And I think that bleeds into their outlet passes and their open floor play. And they stress all the time, run to the corners. Ben Shepherd plays more than anyone understands why, because he's so good at those principles. He is a master of little transition nuances, and he makes his corner threes, right? Like that's what they're all about. And of course, again, if they didn't have Tyrese Haliburton, they probably couldn't play that way. Like he's brilliant in transition with the ball and everything, but anybody can push, Siakam's throwing it down the floor. Obi Toppin recently has been better at getting it off the rim and pushing with the ball. Like they're just comfortable with anybody doing that and throwing it up ahead. And using the open floor to their advantage. And that is more possible now because they're 15th in defense this year instead of being god-awful on that end of the floor. So it really is a contagious team thing, and it's a part of their identity that I think everybody wants to copy, but it's hard to do. Like, you have to have a team buy-in. It's not instinctual for guys to do. They want to take their time and maximize the possession, but they've become really good at it.
Yeah, and on Siakam, especially in transition, like I obviously going back to Toronto, transition killer, has that go-to spin move, the little flick shot, and he's also very efficient, just like Haliburton, in a bunch of different play types. And I was wondering if you think he's maybe been even the more consistent scoring option this year for them on a night-to-night basis. He's dropping 20 points, 7 boards, 50% on field goals, 40% on threes, 75% free throws, and not to hit on all those synergy numbers again, but about 1.1 to 1.2 points per possession in transition, post-ups, spot-ups, ISOs, 100 to 200 of each play, all over the 75th percentile. When you include passes, again, it goes up even higher, especially on ISOs and post-ups. So, what is it about Siakam that just meshes so well with this unit? And, a lot of people might have missed how valuable of a trade that really was to match the style of play, the pace pushing style that Haliburton wants to play with, and then just having that consistent scorer and play finisher off of Haliburton's creation.
Yeah, he's like everything they needed. I mean, at the most basic level of how he helped the team, he's a 4, and they hadn't had a 4 since Ed Young. Like, they tried 2 centers, they tried smaller units, like TJ Warren was a 4.
Shout out David West.
David West, that's right. Like, they've been searching for a 4, and so, like, now Aaron Nesmith's not playing the 4, he's playing the 3. He's better there. Like, that applies to, like, just about everybody on the team fell into a natural position. And, of course, Siakam is amazing, right? Like, He's so consistent. And it was funny leading up to All-Star because I think everybody who covers the Pacers thought he was their most likely All-Star by far. The thing that made his case strong was what you said, consistency. He so rarely has a bad game. He shot under 35% like 3 times this season. He shot under 40% like 6 times this season. But he also very rarely has an exceptional game. I think he scored over 30 points twice in a game this year, right? He is so rock solidly like 17 to 25 every night on between 40 and 60%. And he's going to get his 8 rebounds and his however many assists. You know, and like, that's very good for the Pacers. When they were playing bad, that was what he was doing. When they were playing great, that's what he's doing, right? Like, it's very important to know what you're getting. He plays every game. That's awesome. He fits really well, right? He's got the spin move down. He is very good in transition. When he realizes, I've got a small on me, he's getting to the post, he's putting that guy into the rim, and he's demanding the ball, right? Like, for a good transition team, that stuff's really important. His three-point shot has been bad of late, but better this season than any other season of his career. Very important on the Pacers, right? This is all very important stuff. There's a reason they made the conference finals with him. He's a great player. But it's just the consistency really, really helps this team in a way that they really need it. They didn't have a vet like that on the team. They were really young. Their only vet was TJ McConnell, who is great, but is not having a great year. Like, that has been so huge for them. And it was so interesting that the thing holding him back from like really landing on the map, you know, like dominant performances that get posted all over social, like Siakam 35 points, Pacers win, never happened. Like, he never really did that, but he was never bad. And so his stats are just exceptional. And he's a really good player. He fits very well with the Pacers, especially compared to what was happening at the end of his time with Toronto. Obviously, he was very well optimized there in the middle when they won championships and stuff. And he's been huge for them. I mean, it's so interesting that I'm a very much an advanced stats guy. Like, till I die, I love the way they measure impact. I like being able to figure out which one I think is the best or what prioritizes what I think is important in basketball. But it's been very interesting to me, the gap between him and Haliburton in advanced stats this year, because Siakam has been very good and advanced stats are like, yeah, he's been okay. I'm like, no. That's too low. And I think the consistency is a part of that. And I think the fact that he just has elevated so many lineups this year has been a big part of that. It's just been a really interesting push and pull in my own heart of like, I really believe in this stat. Like, I feel like it's measuring the impact that I see, except for with this guy, who's been really good this year.
Yeah, that's the best part about stats is we can kind of pick and choose when they actually apply, you know. But no, I mean, obviously they tell different things, and they're tools that just measure the impact within roles, I think, as well, more so than just flat out.
No one
saying,
understands that. Like, it measures your impact at what you are doing, not what you if you did something else. Yeah.
Right. Like when Ty Jerome is on the floor in his role in a great system, he's killing it. Is he the 12th best player in the league? Probably not. But like when he's actually on the floor, he's playing like it. And it has to do as much with his role, his system, his opportunity, and obviously credit to him. He's knocking down the shot. So, you know, it goes both ways. But, you know, that's where the roles come in.
We love that.
Shout out Ty Jerome. So, you know, something that gets missed is on the defense. I was wondering, you know, there's this reputation with Indiana. They play so fast that it almost has like an all-star game type of feel sometimes. And yet they have the 15th defense in the league. They're right smack dab league average. They're not like bottom of the barrel or anything. And Siakam has always been a plus defender. I think Haliburton has great defensive tools. We saw him get 5 stocks the other day against the Raptors. I was wondering, do you think that's, you know, consistency and effort on their part to try to like get the defense a little bit better, or is there something else where maybe Haliburton like some games he's on, some games he's off? Is there anything there? And then a fun stat on some defense for Myles Turner for you is only 4 players in the entire NBA have 90 blocks and 103 point made this season. Victor Wembanyama, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brook Lopez, and Myles Turner. And, you know, a lot of people might not realize he's the defensive anchor that can hit the pick and pop 3 just about as well as anyone in the league. He lit up the Raptors as well the other day for a couple of those threes. He's 5th in blocks in the entire league, tied for 4th among centers with 3-point made. So, you know, how big has Myles been while also having to deal with trade rumors his entire career?
Yeah, that made no sense. He does all that stuff you said. They're a good team. They're like, yeah, we should move him. yeah, we should give up this year. Yeah, their defense in general has been fascinating because on media day, a big topic of their team there's so much continuity this year. Like, the rotation is exactly the same except Thomas Bryant's playing backup center, right, from last year. And so the question was very obvious. How will you be better? They didn't have Thomas Bryant at media day. And they all said something to this effect. One was obvious, internal development. They're a younger team. Okay, great. We get that part. The other one was post Siakam trade. I think they were 21st on defense last year. It's not good, but like better than, the team you described that was, winning 148 to 140 a lot, right? And then post All-Star break, I think they were 19, right? And so their thinking was, if we're that good on offense again, and we're 19th for a full season, we'll be better. And like, okay, I get that. That stands to reason. And then the season started, and they were not. They were not good on defense, and they were worse on offense. They started 10-15 because they weren't good at either thing they hoped to be better at. And again, that Charlotte game was just a flip. Like Tyrese was telling me about how he had a meeting with Rick Carlisle and Jenny Busick after that game about how he can be better on defense, how the team can be better on defense. What do they need to do to wake up on the end of the floor? Well, it also helps that they got Andrew Nembhard back from injury right around that time. And then a little later that month, they got Ben Shepherd back from injury. And since then, they've been great on defense. Like they were top 10, I think top 5 maybe in January. I forget. Really good in January specifically. And it's like a real thing. Like every night, they just gave up 91. That's the fewest they've given up in a game this season. And Toronto is not a good offensive team, and they had 18 turnovers and made 6 threes. But like that is unheard of for the Pacers of last year, right? They are certainly a much better defensive team this year. Nembhard's taken a step forward on that end. Shepherd is reliable. And Myles Turner, I think, since the NBA Cup, has played the best defense he's played in the last, let's say, 2.5 years, probably. He credits that too. I think this is interesting. I asked him about it very recently because the stats don't really jump off the page or anything. And it's not like they change the coverages. He attributes that to like individual synergy with other defenders. Like he's figured out how to defend pick and roll with Andrew Nembhard versus how to do it with Tyrese versus how to do it with other guys. And he's always been sharp at pick and roll coverages. Like he was amazing in drop for forever when he was, one of the best defenders in the league. And so I think this is his best defensive stretch in a long time. And of course, it helps that he's making every three he's taking. Feels like he literally just did that in his last game. So you pair that growth of Nembhard, Turner playing at a good level, Siakam, it took him a while to get used to a new scheme last year, especially because the Raptors play and Nick Nurse plays very, let's say, unique defense. He had to adjust, and Tyrese is playing better defense this year. They still have some guys who are minuses, certainly, but Ben Mathurin's taken a defensive step this year. Altogether has made them about average, right? And that's good enough for a team that scores as well as they do. Is it like enough to win a title? Probably not, but like no one thought this team would be this good on defense. Not even me. Like when I was talking to people before the season on podcasts or just talking to people around the league, I was like, you can get out of the bottom 10, and people were like, probably not, probably not. And I think that was a fair way to put it. And they certainly have. And there's a chance they finish the season above average. It's my biggest question down the stretch is what really are they on defense? As good as they showed in January, as bad as they showed to start the year. But of late, they've actually been credible on that end. And that's what's vaulted them from like pesky fun 6 seed to like, they might post around.
Yeah, especially with the playoff experience last year, especially with the way they want to push the pace. It all starts with getting stops and being able to, force a turnover, which is one of their best defensive attributes, and then score off of those turnovers. And, on that 3-point shooting, Myles Turner is at 41% on 5 catch and shoot threes a game. Haliburton's right up there, 44% on 2 catch and shoot threes a game. And really down the line, there's just a lot of good catch and shoot 3-point shooters with Mathurin, 42%, 2 per game. Shepherd's at 38% on 3 per game. Siakam, 40%, 4 per game. Like really across the board, the whole rotation, they're able to play with some, 5-out type of spacing there where a lot of these guys can shoot. So I was mostly wondering from here is, who else is the most impactful winning player for this team right now or this season? Like who else is impacting winning as much as kind of the marquee names? And I'm glad you shouted out Ben Shepherd because I don't know if the rest of the country and league is as familiar with him as some of the other guys like the high flying Obi Toppin, who's there as a, a play finisher and help side block. And Thomas Bryant has the highest BPM on the team of anyone, if we don't count Okafor, who doesn't really play. Ben Mathurin, super impressive scorer. Like he's always been an exciting downhill, quick first step type of bucket getter. And obviously Andrew Nembhard jumped on the scene as, a real legitimate starting level player for them. So, there's Aaron Naismith. You mentioned TJ McConnell, a little bit of a down year, but makes winning plays. So who has really stood out for you this season on this team?
Yeah, I like that you've mentioned Ben. I think if Ben Shepherd was 2 inches taller, they couldn't afford him. He's he shoots threes, he defends his butt off. Like, he is every coach's dream. And I this is my joke I have made in Media Row a lot this year, is like, anytime a game like has a shifting dynamic that slightly doesn't favor the Pacers, I call it the Ben Shepherd button. Rick Carlisle slams the button, in comes Ben Shepherd, because he's a stabilizing guy. He never makes mistakes. His turnover rate's really low. He's a good enough shooter. He's a talented defender. Every coach loves that player. That guy he touches the ball 5 times a game. Like, that's exactly who you want out there. He's not going to mess anything up, and he's going to make stuff better. And he's 6'6", with the hair up. Like, he's not 6'6", So he's kind of limited on who he can guard. Truly, he guards better than wings. I call him a wing. It's kind of generous, but he's good. He is actually good. There's a reason they play him all the time, and they play him over Jarris Walker, which is like a very much a point of contention among a lot of fans. But he's good. Like, he should play. He helps them win games for a reason. I think it was their 3rd or 4th guy in minutes, and they went over their Raptors tonight. In terms of their actual like climbing impact guys, though, beyond him, I mean, it's Andrew Nembhard, who, like, at times this season the debate has come is like, is he the 3rd most impactful player? I don't think so. He's probably still behind Myles Turner, but he has certainly reached that kind of conversation. He's not playing well of late, which has really kind of cemented that Turner is number 3, but he is the perfect foil for Haliburton. He can really guard. He does a great job on star level ball handlers. They put him on all of them. He just guarded quickly very well last night. He's been on every one, you name it. And he does that well, moving the ball pretty well. He's a good enough shooter. He has his own kind of signature shot at the elbow. His turnover is a little loose. His handle's a little loose right now, but in general is a good enough creator. He's been their backup point guard with McConnell out. He is very valuable to their success. Like, their season flipped basically the second he returned from injury and could play full games. They got better because they had a very reliable defender and another offensive force. He is very good. Like, one of the most underrated players in the league. Consistency is his issue, right? He does have games where you're like, oh, that was bad. Like, that was a rough night from Andrew Nembhard, and I think that's on me for not knowing why necessarily yet. Like, maybe just ask him, dude. But, figuring that out, I think, is the next step for him, getting some consistency down. Like, a 6 turnover, 5 foul game is not going to cut it. But he is, at his best, he is very good, right? He can really shut down guys or really make their lives hard. And he can score enough, and he can run units enough. Like, everybody remembers what he did against the Celtics in the conference finals last year when Haliburton was out. He's really good, and he is kind of their ascending, I think, solid starter. Like, there's no way he'll ever get yanked from that starting 5 because he's the perfect foil to their star players.
Yeah, that's a great shout. I feel like he really came onto the scene and was the past season or so, and just has earned a little bit more of that national respect. Is like he's a guy. Like, he's a starter. He's going to be a part of that core for the foreseeable future. And I'm not sure how many people saw that coming, other than him being a winning player, going back to his days with Jalen Suggs at Gonzaga. Yeah. And his brother Ryan Nembhard is also makes these winning plays from Creighton and now at Gonzaga as well. So it's cool to see him get a little bit of credit and can kind of see the chemistry there as well. So I'm super excited to see where they go from here. And any parting thoughts on this season? Where do you think the team expects to finish this year after maybe arriving a little bit early last year with the conference finals run?
Selfishly, as somebody who would like to be able to drive to other playoff series, if they could finish in the 4-5 against Milwaukee or Detroit and then play Cleveland in the second round, that'd be sick.
Oh, man.
My
right
own
in the area.
Personal rooting interest aside, I think they can finish 4th, certainly. The Knicks are probably uncatchable. They lost the tiebreaker with them, so 3 is probably out of the question. It's not impossible. I feel like the Knicks win like 4 out of every 6 games, and then after both of their losses, everyone's like doom and gloom about them. Like, they're still really good. So I think that their hope would be to host a series, especially after you make the conference finals last year. Like, the hope is a better regular season and similar, if not more, playoff success. But really, too, like, they're blending evaluation. They haven't seen Ben Mathurin in the playoffs yet. That's really important for them to figure out who they're going to pay, how they're going to keep this team together. They haven't seen Thomas Bryant in the playoffs yet for them, and so knowing how those guys hold up in the postseason setting could kind of dictate their future too. So I really think they want to make it and give themselves a favorable situation to play as many postseason games as possible. Duh. That's what every contender wants to do. But not only does it help them with their goals of winning, it helps them with their goals of figuring out exactly what their core is and what they hope to be going forward, because they have 3 more years of Siakam, Haliburton after this for sure, and figuring out exactly how to build that team is the name of the game for them.
No doubt. Well, they really turned the season around. They're on the right trajectory now for the rest of this year, and they got their core in place, and like you said, just got to evaluate kind of who fits where going forward. So super excited to see how that plays out, and just want to thank you for hopping on the pod today, Tony, and it's been great talking hoops. Always a fun time.
I love talking hoops. That's why we do it every day, man. This was awesome. Thank you.
Have a good one. Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.